I'm Aldo. Welcome to Plays the Thing, the channel where I share my experiences prepping and playing tabletop role-playing games. It's 2 days before our next session, and I'm prepping for the next phase of our D&D 2024 Redmarch campaign. The time crunch is real, so I'm trying something new, an experiment if you will, and that is using AI to help me brainstorm ideas and handle details. Is this a good idea? I don't know, but the next few days will tell me something about that. The first few phases of today's prep involved no AI. My first step was to send the group a recap of what happened in the vaults of the Embered Hand via Signal. We played that adventure a couple of months ago, so I wanted to make sure everyone remembered where we left off and how the characters know each other. Then it was time to get down to actual prep. As is my usual practice, the first thing I did was to sit down and ponder the characters. Character generation and our last adventure provided me with rich character relationships that had started to evolve, so I began prep by journaling about my observations regarding these character relationships. I summarized what I knew about them, wrote about how they interacted with one another during the first adventure, and I started musing on what these interactions suggested about what they care about and what they are doing or what they want to do. Some of this journaling led me to ask questions. Sometimes I would answer my own questions with possibilities as part of the journaling process. Other times I would just let the questions stand without responding to them. There was one point, which I'll discuss in a moment, that really confused me, and I expressed that confusion in the journaling. Once I had a nice, robust, although very messy journal, I fed it to Claude AI, and I asked it to organize and streamline my stream of consciousness thinking. I asked it to comment on the possibilities I had laid out, and I also asked it to take a stab at answering some of the questions that I had asked. Claude generated a bunch of material. Some of it I instantly loved and adopted. In that sense, it was like delighting at surprises rolled on a random encounter or NPC generation table. Other times, it gave me stuff that was completely off base, which led me to push back and say, no, that doesn't work because of whatever. Often, in explaining why its suggestions were wrong or not good enough, I'd stumble onto a better answer myself. At other times, I'd give Claude an opportunity to correct its mistakes, and sometimes I entertained some of the options that it generated as a follow-up. In the end, this give and take process was fun, inspiring, thought-provoking, and a lot quicker than what I would have been able to do alone. Whenever I'm engaged in adventure design, I'm talking to myself, and that's awesome, but sometimes I'll get into a mental loop where I keep circling around something over and over. Being able to essentially talk to myself with an artificial assistant really helped me to break out of those cycles and help to move me along. One key moment where Claude helped save me from my own mental loop issue was a chronological situation that had me stuck. Lauren, who plays Theron, told me that Theron was a child when the orcs conquered her lands, and that she and her father had escaped to become resistance leaders. Mario said that his character Roman was the son of one of the orc conquerors, born from a political marriage to help legitimize Tharzug's rule. Both Mario and Lauren said that their characters had shared a childhood together, and that led to some of the drama that we saw in their interactions in that second session of the first adventure. But I was like, wait a minute, how is it possible that she was a child when her family fled, and Roman was born after the invasion, but yet they're almost the same age and they shared a childhood? It just didn't make sense to me. But I didn't want to have them like rewrite their backstories. I just wanted to find a way of making all that work. I wouldn't obsess over a detail like that just because I'd want to have fully fleshed out character backgrounds. I actually don't want to have that. But in this case, I was starting to think that some of that backstory would be important for setting up specific situations. And so it became important for me, for purposes of my prep, to actually have a response to that question. The thing is, I know myself. When I'm presented with a historical or chronological puzzle like this, I'm going to sit with it for a long time. I will come up with something if I sit with it long enough, but I needed to move things along because I needed to prep other more practical things. So I fed Claude the conundrum. I told it that one thing we might be able to leverage is that These were staged invasions. The orcs didn't conquer everything at once, but different kingdoms fell at different moments during their invasion. Seizing on this, Claude spit out a solution that I instantly loved. Maybe Thirin's family was conquered first when she was a toddler. They escaped and took refuge with another noble house. That's the noble house that was conquered later. And when that happened, the Ursinias were kept as political prisoners. And it was in that context that Roman was born. So they did share a childhood together. And eventually the Ursinias escaped. I was like, holy crap, that's perfect. It worked really well. And it's an example of how this collaboration really helped me speed up my prep. The other thing that worked out well with this collaboration is that Claude invented a new NPC. Actually, Claude initially made a mistake referring to Thirin's stepmother when she was living under Tharzug's rule. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. I never said that she had a stepmother. Claude then said, oh, you're right. Then I said, should we make that stepmother into Roman's mother? And it said, yeah, that actually makes sense. Make Roman's mother essentially a stepmother figure. Maybe she was protecting Thirin because she was a playmate to Roman in the court. That leaves me asking, okay, well, what happened to Thirin's actual mother? And we haven't gone there yet, but this creation of the stepmother is something I like because now there's an emotional attachment between both children and this NPC that emerged from the process of collaborating with Claude and trying to untangle the mistake that it made. All right, so having worked through the character foundations with Claude, I then asked for help with factions. Coming into this prep, I already had 5 established factions, from pragmatic orc rulers to desperate magic users practicing infernal arts to honorable but potentially doomed knights. Vex, in that second session, introduced a new wrinkle when he said that Lord Ursinia was an active resistance fighter. First, I considered folding Lord Ursinia into the existing Blades of the Fallen, our main resistance faction, but I already had leadership and identity established for them, and introducing Ursinia would fundamentally change what they were. So I fed Claude the problem. We have these existing factions with their motivations and methods. Now we need to add Lord Ursinia's group, make it distinct, but make it logical. Claude came back with Ursinia leading essentially another resistance group, but one willing to make darker compromises than the traditional Knights of the Blades of the Fallen. I was like, yes, that's exactly what I need. It adds another moral spectrum for the players to navigate, and it's one that's deeply connected to at least one, if not more, of the characters. Then I had Claude revise all the faction write-ups so Ursinia's group informed the others' positioning. Quick, clean, and I didn't have to rebuild work I'd already done. When players eventually have to position themselves relative to these other factions, there won't be a clear good guy option, just different approaches to survival and power, each with their own costs. And of course, there's always the possibility that the players will forge or try to forge a completely different path than any of these factions presents. Okay, with characters and factions in place, I was ready to come up with situations for play that we'll dig into in a few days. The last thing I did today was basically start training Claude on what my GMing philosophy is. No predetermined plots, just scenarios with multiple valid outcomes. A little bit more complicated than that, but I don't have time here to kind of like present the whole prompt. Anyway, working with Claude, I've started developing competing summons that could hit the party if they return to Redmarch. Essentially, multiple urgent messages that invite the players to choose between conflicting loyalties and time-sensitive opportunities. Each of these paths will present different consequences and implications, but here's the thing. I don't know if they'll even go to Redmarch. And if they don't, they won't get all of these. They might head straight to Lord Ursinia. And that's situation-based design in essence, right? Preparing for multiple possibilities without knowing what will actually happen. I have no expectations here, no story arc that I'm working towards. I hope to flesh all of this out a lot more tomorrow because game day is coming up, but now I have to turn in, so that'll have to be another time. So that's my report on how I turned to AI at the end of a very busy week to try to help me catch up and be ready for play in just a few days. Will all of this work out? I don't know. We'll see, but I'm going to play around with it a little bit more over the next day or two and then we'll see what this does for me or to me when we try to pull it all off at the table. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, I wish you good health, I wish you good cheer, I wish you good gaming. Goodbye.